Alright, so this is going to be a tutorial of sorts on how to make a steam locomotive for immersive railroading, Minecraft mod, whatever the hell it is. It's not going to be a super in-depth tutorial where I'm going to provide you resources and you're going to copy exactly what I do. It's more of an insight into how I do everything, and it's going to hit some basics like setting your units, setting whatever keybinds you want to use, manipulating and moving objects, scaling meshes, creating new meshes. We're going to cover how to switch your units to feet instead of meters if you want to do that. I'm going to cover orthographic view, perspective view, all that jazz. We're not going to fool with lighting or cameras because nobody needs that. But this is Blender 2.8, and if you haven't downloaded 2.8, I highly recommend it. It's very good for the beginner, as the UI has been shaken up drastically, and yeah, it's much better off for the beginner getting into Blender. It's harder for somebody who already knows Blender very well, slightly, just because everything's located somewhere else. So first, we're going to go over to Preferences, and I'm going to make this a little bigger so the stream can see. And we're going to go over to Key Map, and you just click this right here and get Blender 2.7x. If you prefer your, you can use the Blender. Blender is the new keybind for, 5 viewers. Woo. Blender is going to be your keybinds for 2.8. Your 2.8 keybinds, your circle, pie menus, all that. Industry compatible is something like Maya or Autodesk. If you're familiar with one of those programs, that'll be a similar key map set. But 2.7x is the same keybind setup as Blender 2.7, what have you version. I prefer Blender 2.7x because I learned on Blender 2.7x, and I don't like my pie menus. So you can look on the internet. I've forgotten how I've done it, but you can switch your pie menus to tab menus, which I prefer, which, if you don't know, that'd be like this. Instead of a pie menu, you get a nice tab menu where you can read all your options and not have to worry about moving your mouse off and suddenly all of it disappears. So that's basically what I'm doing here. Is I'm going to be giving you keybinds that are compatible with 2.7x, the 2.7x profile. So Blender, when you start, you're given a camera, a point light, and then you have a 1 meter by 1 meter cube, 1 meter squared, if you will. So this is like a Minecraft block, essentially. And we're not going to worry too much about this. We're going to, well, personally me, I prefer to use feet and inches, and you could do that, and what have you. So if you come over here to Scene, or not Scene, it is, oh yeah, Scene. If you come over to this tab menu right here, you have all these nice little tabs on the side. You go to the one that's the little cone in the circle. This is Scene, and you're going to want to open Units, and you can swap your unit system. You can use None, which is Blender Units, Metric, which uses meters and centimeters and I guess kilometers. I doubt you could zoom out that far. But and then there's Imperial, which Imperial is your feet and your inches, and your centimeters, I guess, are decimals of inches. So I use Imperial. So you see how that changed our, if we go from None, or Metric is None basically, to Imperial, it changes all of our little snap steps, our grid. So this is now, I forget what this unit is. It's about a foot. I mean, it's not a foot. It's close though. It might be. I don't really care too much about the specifics. If you want to care about the specifics, you could probably look up how much each one of these little snap steps are. So you see, when you start, you're going to be like this. If you want to click here, this is your Move tool. And this will allow you to manipulate objects. So if you click your object and drag, so click and hold, and you can drag it. So the blue one is the, you know, I can't think today. It's your Z, it's your Z axis, and then your red is your X, and green is your Y. And if you just are wondering how I'm undoing, that's your standard industry. Control Z to undo, and Control Shift Z to redo your action. So Control Z, Control Shift Z is undo and redo. And then Control, if you hold Control while you're dragging, you can snap to grid, which is always snap to grid if you can snap to grid, because it makes your life a million times easier if you can just stay on the grid. It also makes symmetry a million times easier as well. So if you don't mind, I am going to move these over here just kind of out of the way. They're not that important. I just leave them in there because why delete them? They give me a good reference point. So from my understanding, the way the arrow is pointing on your little manipulator on your x-axis, that's the direction that's going to be the front of our locomotive. It might be the other way around, but that's going to be the front. So behind it is going to be the rear. This is going to be the left and the right. So, one momento. We got to go over some more basics. Is that if you look at your number pad, if you have a keyboard with a number pad, you probably should have one. You have a bunch of number pad keys. These correspond to camera views with, you know, whatever. 5 and 8, or excuse me, 2 and 8 are up and down, like this, and then 6 and 4 are right and left. And then the way I move around is if you press and hold your middle mouse button, you can rotate around a point, and then do that combined with a shift hold. So if you just hold the shift and then middle mouse, that moves the point you're rotating around. So you can move around like this and then, you know, not hold shift, and you can just rotate around that point, and you can scroll in and out with your mouse wheel. So you'll figure it out. It doesn't take a long time to get comfortable, you know, doing little increments, moving around and zooming and like looking at all the angles of something. It's just something you kind of got to practice remembering. Hold your middle mouse button to rotate around that point. Hold shift and then click your middle mouse and drag to move. And then scroll up to zoom in, back to zoom out. And finally, the final basic thing I want to go over, other than these tools, we'll cover them as we encounter them, is Orthographic View, which is what you will be using a lot of the time if you want to get your scale right, your symmetry right, and get, you know, stay on the grid and not, you know, snap or get off of the snap grid. And sometimes you will have to, but you see, if you hit number pad 5, it opens Orthographic View. And Orthographic View, same principle, except you cannot rotate in Orthographic View. So it's only shift, press your middle mouse. The arrows on the cube, you see these tools? This is select box, cursor, move, rotate, scale, transform. We're worrying about the move tool. And then it's, I don't know about your version of Blender. Mine is right-click to select an object, and then left-click is move the cursor. It might be reversed for you if you feel more comfortable with it that way. By all means. If not, you know, it doesn't matter, to be honest. I you know, grew up on 2.79 or 2.7, yeah, 2.79 A and B. So there it was right-click to select an object, left-click to, you know, manipulate those cursors. And if you right-click, it does this, which is pretty jank, and it gets you off the grid. So you don't really want to do that. But holding Control snaps you to the grid, which is the most helpful thing. and is well worth. Excuse me. Let me move this back. If you don't know what I'm doing there, I'll cover it later. It's probably the second most handy thing. So, as I was saying, orthographic, so number pad 5 opens the side view for orthographic. So this is the right side. Excuse me. Sometimes you have to hit a couple buttons to move it around. So 1 is actually the right side, I would say, of your model. And then if you hit Shift and press 1, it flips you around. So you see there. So this is just the left side looking towards the right. And then 3 is the front view on your model. And then Control 3 is the rear view. And the same for 7 is top. Control 7 is underside. So it's basically just 1, 3, and 7. Just you're using Control to do right, left, front, back, top, bottom. And that'll be more evident once you actually get something, you know, that's not a cube. You'll be able to tell. And then again, it's just press your middle mouse button and Shift to move around, and then you can zoom in and out. You can't rotate. If you rotate, it does this, and it pulls you out of orthographic. And the thing about orthographic that's great is when you zoom in, you see all these little cubes. You see how we have these big units. These big units, I guess, are feet, you could say, or maybe like 2 feet. And you have smaller units, and smaller units, I guess these are inches. And then you can go in here, centimeters. And you can go to sub below that until you get to a unit that you can't go anymore. So that's why I prefer to model in feet, mainly because I'm from the good old USA, and we do everything in feet and inches here. And also, when you zoom in, you have a lot of snap steps to work with. And that allows you to line up to your drawings more easily and not have to use smooth settings for, you know, your mesh. We'll just call it a mesh. That is what it is. It's a mesh. So Control is your friend. Always remember Control is your friend. And probably lastly, I need to cover, well, trying to think. We'll briefly cover edit mode. So we're in object mode, which is moving around. And by the way, I forgot to mention, all these tabs right here correspond to different layouts of Blender. They're for different things, like this is shading, you know, texture painting, animation, rendering, compositing. That's like putting videos and stuff together, scripting. There's layout, which is the default one. We're going to be using modeling because it gives you the bigger view off the bat, and it gives you everything you need on hand. So what we're going to do here is, first I'm going to say press in. I like to have this transform box up here. Gives me the dimensions of the mesh I'm working with, as well as the scale and the location and the rotation based off the original location. So if you see I move this, you see the value for feet moves. So I'm moving by feet. And if I move it up and down, it you know, is different. If I press S, you know, and scale it, you see, you get what I mean. If I rotate it some odd way like that, you know, all the values change. So that's a little handy-dandy menu. If you just press in, and you can press N to hide it again if you don't like it, clogging up your view. So I'm going to cover edit mode really fast before we get to how to scale your drawings to work with those. So we're going to hit Tab. Tab puts you in edit mode, and there's a lot to see here. Don't worry too much about a lot of this stuff on the side. We're going to use like 3 or 4 of these things, maybe. I mainly know everything off of keybinds, not icons. So, and the transform is no good in edit mode. It's no use to you. So see, if you have your manipulator tool, there are these 3 values right here. This is Vertex. A vertex is a point on your mesh. It's one of the key points of your mesh. So see, this is a vertex. And you know, you could select 2 vertexes and move them around. By the way, Shift, you click one, whatever your button is to select, and then you hold Shift and click another one, and that selects 2. and you can, select more, and you can press it again to deselect it, or you can just click elsewhere. Not in edit mode, but in other modes, you can click elsewhere, and then Control Z, of course, to undo. Same thing right here. This is an edge. So you might just want to call this a line, but it's an edge. So it's just between two vertexes is an edge. And you can select an edge. You can do whatever you want with it. You can make some monstrosity like this. It's going to be really broken because this is all one face, which we'll cover in a second. You can do a lot of stuff with just edges. And then I work often with faces. So a face is a face. It's, four. It could be three. It could be four. 3 or 4 or more vertexes have a face between them. So this is a face. And you could just call this a side of your cube. You could do some interesting things with it. It's really good, in orthographic. You can align it up very easily. You can, if you hold Control, you can move it some very fine steps and line it up with another cube. Just basic things. And that's all I really want to cover on edit mode until we actually get into it in depth. Because it'll just, overload everybody who hasn't ever touched Blender in their lives. And definitely go watch some actual Blender Basics tutorials. The Blender Guru, or whoever he is, has some really good ones for 2.8 that you should go see. Albeit that they're not for the keybind set for 2.79x. So now we're going to worry about model creation. So always collect reference images. If you can, collect drawings. In this case, I have, by the generosity of anonymous person, I have a very, very fine set of drawings to use. And it's something. Drawings really help because they're scaled to scale. You shouldn't trust them all the time, but they're to scale, right, left, bottom, top, in midsections for whatever you're trying to model. So first I will say, decide what scale you're modeling in or what gauge you're modeling for. In this case, I'm in feet, as we can see over here. So if I hit N, I can resize this cube. So maybe I only want it to be a foot wide, in every direction. I don't know how large a cube is when you spawn it. Cube, I guess it's 2 feet. So we'll make it 2 by 2 by 2. And say I want to go, I don't know. We want to make, in this case, we're going to make a 3-foot gauge locomotive. So I'm just going to scale this to 3 feet. So I might make it a little smaller, 1 by 1. So this right here, this beautiful, beautiful thing, is my gauge. This is just going to tell me this is 3 feet wide. So this is the gauge of the track I'm working with. Right here is 3 feet wide. And I might reduce this a little more. I like it to be a little more, I don't know, more this kind of shape so it's out of the way. But this is my gauge. So this is 3 feet wide. Standard gauge would be 4 foot. And then you can go 8.5 inches. And that is standard gauge right there. That's the width between your rails. So your rails will be on the outside of this. But that's just the width between the rails. So we're just going to undo, because we're going to do 3 foot. Because I think smaller models are easier to work with, especially detail-wise. You don't want to take on a project that's this horribly hard model and just get stuck and bogged down and you feel like you're horrible because you aren't making progress. Take time and learn the keybinds. The faster your workflow is, the more confident you are in your abilities to actually work and, I guess achieve your modeling goals, whatever those are. I just want to snap this to an actual unit. There we go. It's bugging me. But basically, this is 3 foot wide. That's what we want. This is going to be the width between our rails. So on many drawings, you will see that there is on the front views. And always try and get your drawings in one piece, like as a single scan of a page, or maybe 2 scans of a page in my case with this. So I'll have to scale the 2 halves of the drawing twice, just because they're split up. But if you can get everything in one go, then you only have to scale one of the views to your 3-foot or standard gauge or whatever the heck you're trying to do, cube. It's 3 feet wide. Scale the rail widths on your drawing to 3 feet wide, and bam, you're in 3-foot scale. You're in scale. Your drawing is scaled to your track, and this green line right here, your y-axis. This is the floor. Imagine this as the floor. This is the surface your wheels should touch. Imagine this is the rail head. So when we go to do drawings in like 2 seconds, that's what we're going to do. So before we do that, if you notice this box up here, this has all your objects in your scene. Your scene is what is visible. We're going to close that and right-click and hit New. We're going to make a new collection. We're just going to call it maybe Drawings. Of course, I can't spell. Drawings. And this is going to be the place, and you can make them visible and not visible with this little eye icon, see. So this, make sure you select that. This is going to be the place where we're going to put a drawing. You want as high a resolution as possible when you actually do a reference image. So you're going to hit space. Space is your cornerstone. It's a search menu for commands and such, so you can play your animations. You can do anything in here. This is basically all the functions that you see going on here, you can do in the space menu. So like oftentimes I'll be separating, so I could separate a mesh by parts or whatever, what have you. So in this case, we're going to go and search background. We're going to load a background image, and then you'll get one of these little containers, and you can go down to context, and you could choose a file. So I think now I should have workable files here. Not here, but elsewhere. Go desktop and go... Of course I can't find anything because that's the wrong desktop. 2, 1, 1, 1, 2 or 1. And of course I clicked the wrong thing. Rotated. TIFF. Bam. Okay. So this is our drawing. It's a little crummy resolution now because I converted it to a TIFF and probably didn't save it as the highest quality thing. So I probably just shot myself in the foot for this model. But we'll just roll with it, I guess. Or I can export it again and whatever. I'm probably going to have to end up cutting this out of the YouTube version. Settings. Let's see. Image TIFF, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, this is taking a minute. Dadgummit. Okay. Image, TIFF, blah, blah, blah. Settings, we'll let it determine it. Okay. Save it. And then if I refresh in Blender after it saves, maybe it won't be so crummy. This is still crummy. Okay. So I have no idea. It's being dumb. On the one day I need it to work, it doesn't work. So that's pretty normal. If you're wondering what I'm doing here, I'm not doing that, obviously. 0.5. Use some alpha right here. Probably. And we're gonna make it. I like to work with my drawings at about 0.5, maybe 0.6. It allows your cubes and whatnot to show up. I know said generous donor of this drawing is somewhere in the viewers, so maybe you can see about maybe scanning this as a TIFF, or maybe I'm just doing something wrong PDF-wise for it, because last time I checked it actually worked just fine. Yeah. So now that you have your whatever, this is kind of bad res, kind of good res, doesn't matter. Actually does matter. You want as high as resolution as possible so you can zoom in and, you know, make a judge of where the middle of your lines and whatnot are. So in this case, what we're going to want to do is see how we have a width between the rails right here. We're gonna drag this drawing down, and this is going to become our front view. If you hit 3, you know, you'll be able to see the front view, and you can rotate your whatever the heck, you know, to face that way. Like in this case now I've rotated it to face right instead of, you know, front. So we're going to scale the drawing to this 3-foot marker. So we're going to use the size value for it to do that. And you're going to just want to work in increments of 5 or 10 and figure out how long it's going to take. Like I just scale it up to 50 because it's normally, at least the resolutions I've been working at, it's going to be somewhere around 50 or more, in this case more. So we're getting close. So see, you've gone a little too far because you want your little black lines to line up with your scale. So, you know, this is the part that takes the longest, is actually getting all your drawings to line up. And then if you have crooked drawings, you have to rotate them, and you want to get this line center and all that jazz. It's a real mess when you have low quality drawings. That's why if you can buy a resource, buy a book that has drawings in it, you know, by all means do it. It'll save you time and headaches working with something that's 500, you know, pixels wide. You don't really want to do that. And then once you get your value for this, you know how much to scale every single other drawing for this view. So by that I mean, and I'm trying to center it, you know, might be a lost cause trying to center it. But I like to have it center because when I model, I only ever end up modeling, I've just scaled it too far, okay, 67. I only ever end up, at least for freight cars, if you want to, you know, apply this tutorial to making a freight car, or a passenger car or something, normally those are pretty symmetrical. So I only ever end up making half, or like a fourth of a car. I don't ever make the entire thing, you know, frame-wise or side-wise. Why is this not? And we're just going to call it done. If you're a little bit off on your scale, you know, it's not the end of the world. There's really worse things you could worry about and spend time trying to fix. So now in this case, I'm just going to try and drag it down and rotate it to get it straight, possibly. So basically, in your drawing, you want the bottom of the wheel to be on this green axis, the y-axis. You know, might as well just make that slightly bigger. Yeah, it compensates for their overhead. So basically, bam, you've got your you know, your in view set up. You know, this isn't a resolution I'd like to work at. The drawing was much higher quality as a PDF. My bad on that. I'll figure out why it won't load PDFs later. But basically, the more pixels you have, the more accurate you can be, especially to the size of things. And like working on something like this is a lot easier at a resolution like this. You know, you can see the pixels, but like, and as sharp as possible. You want it. You don't use sharpening programs. You know, it's not gonna fix a low resolution. You need a couple 100,000 pixels or more, a million pixels. You need. I scan my drawings at 600 pixels per inch. This one is scanned at 1200, I think, but it's not 1200 because I converted it from a PDF to a TIFF, and that kind of yeeted down my quality. But if you can scan it super high res and it's a detailed drawing, even if it's small, you know, air quotes small, and you think, oh, this isn't going to scan very well, just try scanning it really, really high resolutions, and you'll end up maybe with something usable. A lot of times you will end up with something usable. So basically, you found whatever size, at least for this page size, works. And I guess the next scan is the same width. So this works, I guess. You know, sometimes drawings are inaccurate to an extent. You know, they draw the center line on here, and it's not perfect to where the wheels are. You know, it's all hand drawn. You know, on a drafting table. So you got to give them credit how symmetrical they are already. But basically, you found your value for how much you need to scale your drawing to get it to be about 3 feet wide, or whatever gauge you're doing to the edge of that. You know, your little side markers. So then you copy that. In this case, mine's like 66.8. Basically, this is my right side view, and I want this to only be visible on the front. So if you see, if I do Control 3, I can't see it. So basically, this view only applies to the front in orthographic. So now I can just like copy it and slap it down again, as long as, you know, the drawing I want is on the same page, and then I could just, you know, rotate it and move it. I like to move it a little bit behind the center, just so that when I'm trying to line things up, I don't see that. But basically, this is the same scale. And if it's not, you know, if you make a new one, instead of copying, you just paste your value that you already had, as long as it's on the same page. And now, this should be relatively lined up. You know, there's a little bit of height difference between this one and this one, which means I have to drag it down a bit. And this is the most tedious part of modeling, is just, yeah, getting everything lined up the way you want it takes a while. And I would recommend centering your drawing, like trying to center, as I'm doing now. So basically, I'm looking at my wheelbase and say, you know, I have this nice K-27. Basically, I want the center. This is the Z-axis. I want it on the center of the frame, based upon the affecting wheelbase. You know, the rigid wheelbase right here that's not going to be able to rotate in any way. You know, so basically, this is going to be the center of my model, and this will give you a good. It'll be easy to figure out for the IR's code to work with it. If it's centered on the frame or centered on wherever. I think on an articulated, you would be centering on the rear frame, the rigid part, because basically you're going to say from here to here is where you're going to look for like track and change your rotation or whatever. So you want it from the center so you have the same values for each side. It makes your job easier once you implement it, which I'm not going to cover just yet. So basically you've done that, but you don't know if your drawings are perfectly scaled, you know, or semi-perfectly scaled. So the first order of business is we're going to learn some new things now, and I'm going to name these. I'm going to name this front and name this one right, you know, because naming things so that they're easy to find and all that jazz. And I'm also going to lock. So if you hit in and look at all these, I can lock this stuff right here so that I can't manipulate them, their rotation or whatever, for now, just so that I don't accidentally select them and like hit whatever and move them around. And we'll cover some more keybinds, you know, very, very, very shortly. So this is one that's very important, is if you hit Shift to S if you're in the 2.7, you know, X keybind thing, and I have nice, you know, tab grids or whatever tabs. So Control S brings up the snap menu. And these, don't worry, these are the ones we're going to worry about. These you don't use as often. Basically, if you wanted to move the center of a model, like, see here, that center, if I wanted to move it, selection to cursor, you know, you can move things around with it. But in this case, we're going to worry about cursor to world origin. That just returns your cursor, and your cursor is where, if you hit add and add a new mesh to work with, your cursor is where it appears. So you want your cursor nice and on the snap grid at the world origin. And also if you want to mirror things, you want it at the world origin. You know, where it's nice and happy and it's accurate and all that jazz, and this drawing needs to come down a little more because it's angering me. Of course, you know, you'll never be able to get the drawings lined up perfectly, so don't worry about it. I like to nitpick and try and get my things lined up, but they're never, like, your pages are never going to be fully straight when you scan them, and they might be crinkled in a place, so it might be warped. You can't ever get it perfect, but I like to try, or, you know, think that I get it close. So basically, we don't know if this one and this one are the exact same scale. You know, they're hand drawn on a drafting table, so you don't know for sure. So what we're going to do is add mesh. We're going to add a cube, and it's a pretty big cube. It's a 1 meter by 1 meter cube. You know, and we're going to take it over here, and we're going to scale it. So I'm just hitting Control to keep it on the grid, because grid is neat, grid is love, grid is life. Don't worry about it, just stay on the grid, for heaven's sake. It will save you so much time. So we're going to cover some more things. S is scale. Hold Control, and you can scale it like this. I'm not going to do it in this case, because sometimes that makes it so that you don't snap on the grid. If you just wondered how I did that, just middle mouse to flop out of orthographic, hop into edit mode, and select a face, and then just hop back by hitting 1 to do the right side. And I'm just going to hold Control, and I'm going to drag it, and I'm just going to line it up kind of in the middle of that line, because that line is just because TIFFs don't really, well, the TIFF I'm using doesn't really use anything but black or white. It has no in-between colors, like grayscale. It has no grayscale, essentially. It's really hard black or white, and that makes it a little sharper. So basically, I'm just going around and grabbing all these and trying to scale. I like to use the end beam as a reference for scale. So basically, I'm just trying to line this up, like so, and make just visually the end beam. I'm not making it width-wise. You'll see in a second what I'm using this for. This is my end beam, basically, and I check it here. If you go to the front view, is your end beam the same size? Is it too high? Is it too low? It looks like it's too high, so it might be the drawing's fault. As I see, I have a gap here and I have a gap here. So that might be remedied by taking that drawing specifically, this one, and, you know, unlocking the Z-axis and then bringing it down a little bit. Or, you know, sometimes you'll go off a little bit and you'll be a little sad because your drawings aren't perfectly in scale or what have you. Like me, you'll be very sad that this, even though this is hand-drawn, is not akin perfectly to this. There will be differences, and you'll have to learn to deal with them. So basically, I think the issue here is that the drawing needs to be just slightly larger. So we can just add a decimal place and then recenter it. You know, add a 0.5 decimal place wise, and I'm gonna have to undo Z and yep. So is that a little bigger? Can I do this? It's on the line. Maybe just a little bit bigger, go up to 0.9. And this is just something you have to do because you want your drawings to be nice and neat and kind of the same scale overall. To see if we make this one a little bigger, may match the other one a little better. And you know, there's some things you can't fix, but you know, again, I like to think that I can try to fix it. And I might be getting off a little bit on that scaling, or I might be getting a little closer. So once you make your first part, you're going to want to align the drawings up to that first part. Kinda, if you get my meaning. Just yeah, might do being a little bigger still. And this is just the part that takes the longest amount of time. Don't do that. In my opinion, once you get all your keybinds and stuff down, you will dread lining up drawings, but you will not mind sitting for hours at the computer, you know, doing what have you, modeling meshes, because that's a lot more interesting than doing this. You know what, we'll just call it a day and call it good there. So basically I'm going to move that back to the center. And see, now we have our end beam and say, you know, pilot beam. And, you know, it's lined up here. It's about the same size here as it is here. You know, you want to make a certain part, you know, and you want to, maybe you want to do two parts. Maybe you want to make a very visible, like, part of the smoke box, like make the stack, or like make the headlight, or just something that's crossways, or, yeah, that's crossways that you can look at over here, you know, on your front end and kind of line up your drawing, make sure they're all in the same rough scale and all that jazz. And once you get that, you know, all these views are probably about lined up, you know, and what have you. And, you know, you can make a mid-section view for something like that. That's looking forward, looking back. And this drawing is too detailed, as applying two different ones because some slope outwards, some slope inward. I'm doing an inward one, but I'm just using this as a demonstration. I'm going to swap over to the inward facing one in a minute and realign my drawings. But basically, you get the gist. I don't like to scale out my beams. I don't know why. You know, it's easy to just do this and then hit Control. And, you know, the way I did that was, you know, I go here, but you could also go like S and then hit Control, or S and middle mouse and then hold Control and do that. That's all well and good, you know. Doesn't always give you good numbers. Sometimes it'll give you decimals and it'll anger you. It'll really anger you. This drawing is frustrating me still. I want to move it over. Oh gosh. I am a ball of OCD. Don't worry about it. So say, you know, and your two sides, again, are never going to be absolutely perfect unless it's like a CAD drawing, which you'll know those because those have really crisp, straight lines everywhere, and it looks like it came out of a 3D modeling program. So those are, you know, decent drawings. You don't ever find them, though. So, but for me, I don't want this to be whatever the hell I've done to it. So I just want to go back to being, you know, 3 feet wide, or I guess it's 2. So I'm going to go, right here is our center line. This is our Z-axis, this blue one. And we're going to learn some more keybinds. G and hold control. G is move. Move it around, you know? So we're just going to hit G and hold control and move it up and try and drag straight so you don't accidentally drag it up and down. If you're afraid you are going to do that, just lock everything but the axis you're working with. And then you can zoom in to use smaller units and you can make sure it lines up. You know, in this case, easy, bam. It lines up with the center line. And the reason why I'm doing this is I want, you know, my drawing is inaccurate, in this case, on width of this beam. And you can kind of see it how this one is closer to, you know, the edge than this one is. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to go into edit mode, of course. And, you know, if you lose track of where you are, it's probably because you moved off of, you know, where you were, just because you're looking somewhere else. So I'm going to grab this little end bit, and I'm going to hold control, of course, and drag it out. And, you know, it may stay a little bit on the inside there. And that's basically my width of my end beam. And, you know, I can't trust this side because I know that's slightly inaccurate. So in this case, you want to go like this and maybe like delete this face. So if you just select a face and then hit your delete button, you can delete faces. And this is where staying on the grid comes in handy, because if you've stayed on the grid till now, or, you know, in whatever you're doing, you see we have our nice little cursor that's at the origin, so you can hit Control Shift Alt C. I'll repeat, Control Shift Alt C, and do. You see the keybind is right there. Control Shift Alt and C, origin to the 3D cursor. And now if you hit Control M and then hit your middle mouse, Control M is mirror. So basically we can go, if it's going to work for me, I can go Control M and mirror back and forth. Of course it's not happy at the moment, you can't seem to go back. And then you just click to confirm. So basically I can mirror it over and then click. But that doesn't help us because, you know, now it's just on the other side. And that shows how the drawings are different on either side. So if we just hit Control Z, we can Control D and then enter. Do not touch your mouse because you've just duplicated your mesh. Or, excuse me, not Control D, Shift D, and then hit enter. And now you've duplicated your mesh. And you don't want to touch your mouse while you're doing it, mainly because, I'll just show you. If you hit Shift and D and then move your mouse around, you know, whatever axes you have enabled. In that case, it was a good scenario where I have, you know, all of them locked up. But in this case, excuse me, Shift D, and you move your mouse a little, you may move it off just a hair's breadth, and then you'll mirror it and it won't look right because it'll be slightly lower than the other side. So what you want to do is you want to Control or Shift D and then hit enter to confirm, and then just Control M, mirror it over with your middle mouse. Just kind of point in the direction. You see there's a little pointer. Point in the direction you want to mirror it. In this case, we only have two options for mirroring it, basically. So just point over that way, and then you'll get your little mesh mirrored. And then you click to confirm, and now we have two. And they're both the same size, and because we centered on the x-axis, they're absolutely centered. This one's equal to this one. So then if you hold Shift and, I guess, right-click, you can select both of these. And in this case, I'm going to go Control-Shift-Alt-C and go center of mass. And that'll return the centers, the origins, to the center of the mesh. And then I'm just going to select them, hit Tab to enter edit mode, press A to select everything, then hit Alt-M by distance. And that, if I just edit this a little bit, do they have faces in between them? No, they do not. Oh gosh. Of course it's going to be moody today. So basically, you see, we have duplicates because they're just mirrored over the center. They're sharing the same space, so Alt-M by distance. And of course it's not going to work for me. So I've done something wrong here. You don't want the value to get too big, or else you risk messing some important things up. So, I mean, it's being moody today. Normally it's not going to give you any problems, so we're just going to select this edge, this edge, come on, this edge, and this edge, and this edge, this one. You see I'm clicking a little bit to the right or to the left or whatever. I'm trying to get both of them. Or, you know, you could just do build like method and hit C to do circle select, and you can get all of them. Because normally if you can do this, you can go Alt-M by distance. And if, I don't know why it isn't working, because normally you can get it to work. And as you can tell, Blender has it out for me today. Oh yes, of course, I forgot. Control-J, join them together. That is the reason why they were not working. By distance, bam. See how it says removed 4 vertices? That means we had doubles. You know, basically we lined one up to the center line and then mirrored it over, so you have vertices sharing the same location. So you can merge them together and thus cut off some triangles. And then you'll see that because we joined them together, this one looks a little jank color-wise. You know, it's slightly jank, but in this view it's very broken. So we're going to go over to faces, and we're going to select everything by hitting A. A selects or deselects everything in edit mode, and then just Control-N, and that'll recalculate your normals, and that'll make everything nice and dandy. Everything will be fixed, and you've just solved world hunger. Congratulations. That's basically the gist. You know, if your mesh is messed up or you join meshes together, you know, recenter it, maybe apply your rotation and scale, and then Control-N to recalculate all your normals, so then, you know, your mesh isn't fucked up. But yeah, we've just made an end beam, and, you know, I guess you could technically go select your edges like so, and then I don't have my top side down view. I don't need it. I'll just guesstimate. I'd say probably like, I'm doing Control B. Control B is your friend, and I'll show you what it does in like 2 seconds. So this is Control B. Control B does this, and it'll look like this on your end, and you don't want them to cross or else it gets really jank. So basically I'm just dragging in and out after hitting Control B, after selecting some edges. And this is Belevel. It is your friend. Use it wisely and often if you need to make a shape. And if you roll your mouse wheel up, you add more faces. You don't need this many faces, because look how many goddamn faces there are. You've just upped the triangles from, oh, I don't know, you know, 20. You've upped them from 20 to, you know, 400. So you don't need that many. It's Minecraft. It doesn't need to be round. So, I mean, I like it to be kind of round. So I'm trying to make the end on this end beam in this case kind of about the same size as all those faces, which is about there, I'd say. And then I just click. And see, I've done both sides. I've rounded off the edges. And easy. You know, it's just one command. You know, Control B while selecting a face or an edge or something. You know, and bam. And roll your mouse wheel to select how many faces you want. And look, you've just created what you would think would be something really hard to make. Like rounding off edges. And you can use it to make triangles and all that. You can use it to do a bunch of things, and it's extremely helpful. It's very, very, very helpful. You will use Control B repeatedly all the time, because it's that handy. You can use it for so many things. I use it often for making roofs, which I'll cover eventually. But basically, I've just made an end beam, and this probably is not the end beam I need because it's on another drawing over here. But you know, I'm just doing an example, trying to show how you do these things. And if you want to do, I'm going to move this back, so I'm going to select this cube and just drag it up to collection. And always make sure if you're modeling stay out of your drawings collection, or else you're going to be putting a bunch of meshes in there that don't need to be in there, and you're going to make a real mess for yourself to clean up later. Yeah, you just, you know, I don't know what to say. Make sure you're doing the right thing and not fucking up something in the background by being ignorant. Just make sure you're staying in there. Make sure you're control snapping at all costs. You know, make sure you're not accidentally rotating it. And you'll be all fine. You know, your model won't get screwed over. It won't look bigger on this side than this side, or if you try and make a part, you know, this part will look different than this one. You know, you just want symmetry. It doesn't seem like a steam locomotive has a lot of symmetry. It has a lot of symmetry. Like the frame, can't even see the frame in this view. There's a frame in a drawing over here. But I only have to ever make one side of the frame, and then I can just, so long as I make it the right width right here and in the right location, you know, I model everything on the right side and then mirror it over, and then I do stuff that's specific to the left side. So I only have to make one side of the frame, and then I mirror it over, and then I do my in-betweens, my cross ties and all that, and cross beams on my frame. And ta-da! You know, I only have to make one side of the steam chest, then I can mirror it over. Boiler is different. You know, you want to keep it on the center line, you want to center it. But, you know, a lot of things you only ever have to do. I only have to ever make one set of rods. I can just mirror it over. Cab, I make half a cab, mirror it over. And on like freight cars, I may only ever make 1/4 of a freight car. 1/4 of the frame, 1/4 of the body, mirror it over, and then mirror it over the y-axis. Yeah, so basically just make it here. Make the frame, mirror it over to this side, make the side, mirror it over to this side, and then once I get all this done, I mirror it over like that, and then just put the trucks in. Or put the truck here and then mirror it over. So then everything is symmetrical based on the center, so long as you center it here. You know, center it on your x-axis. Always make your models centered, because that's the center. This is the center of the track in IR. So you want your model to be nice and center and happy. Happy little model. You know, you won't have any issues so long as your model is nice like this. Ooh, nice and centered. Because then you could just say the locomotive has 2 end beams. I don't know of any steam locomotive that has 2 end beams like that, but then I could just mirror it over like that. You know, that's what I use for freight cars, passenger cars. Just make one side, mirror it over, so long as all the sides are symmetrical. Yeah, that's basics. Before I get into too much detail, and I'll go scale drawings for the other K-27, the inward sloping piston valves, for the next day's work. But I think probably an hour-long stream of randomness. What this is probably about enough. It's 1:15 at the moment. So I'm open floor for questions. If you had something you didn't quite get, and you don't want to wait till I upload the video to go back and look over it, you have the floor. Twitch chat, I have it up on an overlay. So if you want to ask a question, be my guest. If not, we'll probably be closing the stream in about 5-10 minutes anyways.